Welcome to the third video in the Kinetic Typography series, where what we're going to do is we are going to learn how to get this Illustrator file ready so that we can import it into whatever program it is that you're going to be animating with. There's a few different options. Regardless of what option, as long as it's Adobe in this case, it's going to work. So whether you're using After Effects or Flash or even Premiere, you can animate anything that we're going to be doing here. So let's get into how we're going to prepare this thing. First things first. This is obviously all text. So I've laid it all out, I've changed the color, I've changed the size, I've played around with it. If you have opened the sample file that I've provided for you, you might notice that it doesn't look the way that it's supposed to. It doesn't look like what you're looking at right here. And it could be that you do not have the right font installed. You have to have the font in order to be able to see what it's going to look like. And that's one of the problems we're going to solve. What happens if I send this to somebody else and they don't have the font? What are we going to do? And that's one of the problems that we're going to solve here. So if you're using the sample file that I provided for you, you're also going to want to install the font that I provided, or else it's just not going to look the same. If you've created your own, then you won't have a problem whatsoever because you chose the font. So I've got my 4 artboards here. You may have more or less depending on what it is you decide to do with whatever text you're using, whether it's the one I provided or you've decided to come up with something else. So we have a couple different problems. One is the one that I just mentioned to you. What do I do if I don't have the font, or the person I'm going to send this to doesn't have the font and I can't really provide it for them, whatever the case may be, or different platforms. They have a Mac, I have a PC. Anyways, that's one of the problems we're going to solve. The other problem is that everything is on its own layer. In order to animate this properly, I need to have each of these words and symbols and everything on their own layer so that they can be moved individually. So let's solve the first problem first. That just makes sense. We are going to take care of the font issue. I am going to select all of the text on my screen. So if you have little graphics, so let's say your dialogue says the word stop and you put a little stop sign in there and there's no text, you actually brought in a JPEG or you have a flattened image, then you wouldn't select that in this case. What I'm going to do is select all my text. Now down here I have this one little path, this underline, so I'm going to make sure it's not selected. So I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to hold shift and get rid of that underline. So now all of my text is selected. Now what I'm going to do is tell Illustrator basically trace it. Take all of this text and convert them to an outline, convert it to a path. So it's kind of like taking the pen tool and going around here and clicking. But instead of me having to do that, I'll get Illustrator to do it. 2 ways of doing that: with all of your type selected, go up to type and create outlines. Control-Shift-O, if you remember shortcuts. I never remember this one, but you may be way smarter than I am. So I can go type, create outlines, or another quicker way is just right-click on it and go create outlines. When you do that, you're going to notice that this is no longer text. Now, it's a really good idea to save the text version of your file. I already have it saved, so I'm okay. If you didn't save it, you may want to undo that right now and save this as a text version and then save it again as an outline version. The reason being, I can't correct any of this text now. It's not text anymore, it's drawings. So the problem is, if you misspelled the word dude, you put 2 O's. I don't know why you would do that, but let's say you did, and you wanted to change that, you can't now. It makes it much more difficult. So you may want to save before you do this step. Save it as another version. I'm going to keep going with it because I have my backup. I'm okay. But if you didn't do that already, undo the create outlines, save it as text, save a new version, and then come back and continue the video. So now that this is all outlines, I can send this to anybody. They don't have to have the font installed. Not a problem at all. It will look exactly the same on their computer as it does on this one. So we've solved that problem. Fonts, not an issue. The next problem we have, though, is that everything is on its own layer. So we have to start fixing that. And you'll notice that this is all one, still one, I'm going to zoom in on it here, is all still one big, and it's all together. This is all together. So we need to fix that issue. So the fact that everything is on one layer and that they're still kind of grouped together. So we're going to solve one problem, be presented with another, and have to solve that one. So here we go. First things first, I'm going to select all my type, okay, not the underline. Nice try, underline. And I am going to ungroup it. What that's going to do is separate all of the paths. The problem is it does such a good job after I ungroup that the letter I is now separate. You'll notice before when I selected it, I know who was all selected. Now it's just the letter I. But now K is separate, N is separate, O is separate, W. And so what happens now is that each letter is separated from the rest of the word. So what I need to do now, so I've solved one problem. It's not one big text box anymore, so it can be animated individually. But I have another problem. I need these words to be coming together. So what I'm going to do now is start grouping individual words and consider the letter I. So I is a word in this case. So if you have any graphics at this time, now's a good time to group it, just so that, if you had a whole bunch of lines that made up an object, group them together so that they're all associated with each other as opposed to separate items. So what I'm going to do, group the word I. Okay, and you go through, and I'm kind of far out here, so I might zoom in a little bit. I, no, group. Okay, Control G is your shortcut. If you don't like shortcuts, object, group. I know who I am, and I'm even going to group the exclamation point. At this point, go through your entire file and group all of your words. So I'm going to pause it at this point. I'm going to group all of my words, and then I'm going to resume the video. All right, at this point, all of my text has been grouped together. You notice if I expand the layer, there's a whole whack of groups going on here, and I've even grouped the underline. I took the group, so you can see here, I took the underline and actually grouped it. I just like seeing a whole bunch of groups here. I'm not 100% sure really if you have to do it. I just do it, personal preference. If you find out why I didn't have to group it, then you're fine. So we've solved another problem. Again, the font's not an issue. All the words are separate. We're good to go, and that's awesome. So now these can come in individually. And I have a plan for this exclamation mark. I could associate it with the word am, but I have an idea that I'm going to do something a little bit different with it. And then now, when I look at this though, everything's still associated on the same layer. That's still another problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell Illustrator, take all of this material and give each group, give each item in this list over here on the layers palette, give each one of these its own layer. Very simple to do. Make sure that the layer is selected. Click your drop down menu and choose Release to Layers Sequence. That's going to make it go to layer 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. So if I go Release to Layers Sequence, you're going to notice that each item gets its own layer. If I start turning them on and off, over here in the corner on the first artboard, I know who I am, exclamation point, I'm the, okay, so on and so forth. You're going to want to make sure, this is going to make things easier, that your layers are in order. So as you turn them on and off, like as I turn off the first one, I gets turned on and off. Know who I am, exclamation point, I'm the. So it goes through and turns them off in order. If you find out that you turned off, in this case, layer 18, and I gets turned off, but then I turn off layer 17, and this word dude down here gets turned off, you're going to want to reorder your layers just so that everything is in nice sequential order. When we bring it into the next program, it makes things so much easier. I'm now going to, well, you can see they all have their own layer, and I really don't know why Illustrator does this. Everything is still on layer 1. Kind of weird. So what I'm going to do is select all of my layers except for layer 1 and just drag it out of there. And now you're going to notice that nothing, I should say, is associated with layer 1. So I can click on layer 1 if I turn it on and off. Nothing's going on there. That's good. I can actually delete it. And now I've got all of my layers here ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do, which would be a really good idea, again, organization-wise for your next program, is rename all of your layers. So here, this is layer 18. That's not going to help me when I bring it over there. Well, what's on layer 18? Turn it on and off. Oh, it's the word I. Oh, it's the word no. What I'm going to do is rename all of my layers so that it is whatever is on that layer. So I know who. So here's the word. Oops, that should have been no. So what I'm going to do now, I am going to rename all my layers. I'll pause it at this point. I'm going to rename all my layers, and when I come back, they're all going to look fantastic. They're going to be renamed, nice and organized. I suggest you take the time and do the same. Did you miss me? Of course you did. Here you'll notice that all my layers have been renamed, so I know exactly what's going to be on them. Now my file is all set up. I'm happy with it. Remember, I'm still working on the text version of my file. I don't want to save over that because that's when I actually had text that I could edit. So at this point, I'm going to go File, Save As. There's the text version, and then I might save this one as outline. So if you haven't already saved as a new version, now's a great time to do it because you've obviously done a lot of work, you've watched a lot of a video, you really don't want to have to redo that. I'm just going to click OK at this point. We are going to do some different stuff with that in a second. So now we've got our outline all ready to go. Everything on its own layer. This is fantastic. I'm really happy with it. I'm now going to save it as individual files. So right now, every time I open up I Know Who I Am outline, if I close this file right now because it's saved, and I'm just going to go File, Open Recent Files, and reopen it, you're going to notice that all 4 artboards are together. This makes it complicated if you want to animate later because I don't want everything to come in at the same time. I want to work with it individually. So I'm going to save each artboard individually as an individual file. I'm going to do the same thing. File, Save As. I'm going to even choose the same file name. It'll be fine. It's going to ask me, are you sure you're saving over top of an already existing file? Do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. And you're going to see here, there's an option, save each artboard to a separate file. That's what I want to do. It's going to give you 5 files in this case. It's going to save this version, which has all 4 in it, and then it's going to give you artboard 1, 2, 3, 4 as separate files. So you're going to have 5 files in total. I'm going to click OK. It'll tell me again, are you sure you want to override your outline file? Yeah, I'm okay with that. And I'm done. If I go into my computer, there you go. You can see here I've got I Know Who I Am outline, outline 1, 2, 3, 4. If I open up outline 1, you'll notice it's just artboard 1 with the content of that artboard. Notice that all the layers here, it doesn't matter what artboard it is, they're all there. But now here, you're only going to see the layers associated with it, and then you can have artboard 2, or in this case I called it outline. There's artboard number 2, 3, and 4, all of it nice and ready to go. So I have my original text, I have all 4 artboards in an outline file, and then I have each of the artboards separately. And at this point, I am now ready to bring it into the program that I'm going to be animating with. Are you excited? You should be. Let's move on to the next video.